This story is titled, My Family Excluded Me from a Fancy Dinner They Were Organizing, but they expected me to set the table and clean up afterward. Instead, I ruined their dinner, made a reservation at my favorite restaurant, and turned off my phone. Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. So, here's the deal. My name's Julia, and I'm 35 now, but if you look back at my life, you'll notice one thing. I've always been the family's unpaid assistant. No, scratch that. More like their unpaid everything. You know that one person in the family everyone runs to when something needs to be done? Yeah, that's me. Been like that since I was a kid. It started small, like when I was about 8 or 9. My mom, Lisa, would call me into the kitchen and say, Julia, sweetie, can you help set the table? Not a big deal, right? Except it wasn't just setting the table. It was arranging everything perfectly, folding napkins into some fancy shape she saw in a magazine, and making sure every plate was exactly 2 inches from the edge of the table. And if it wasn't, she'd sigh and fix it herself. You'll get it eventually, she'd say, like I was training to be some Michelin-starred waiter. Then there was my older brother, Luke. He's 3 years older than me and somehow managed to avoid being roped into anything remotely resembling responsibility. When he was 15 and I was 12, he had a science fair project to do. Instead of working on it himself, guess who got stuck building a volcano out of papier-mâché at the kitchen table? Mr. and Luke had the nerve to complain that the lava didn't flow cool enough during his presentation. Mom just smiled and said, "At least you helped him get it done." By the time I hit high school, it was just understood that Julia would handle anything remotely stressful. My little sister Rachel was born when I was 14, and from then on, my life turned into a never-ending list of, Can you just watch Rachel while I run to the store? Can you just help Luke write his college essays? Can you just organize the family reunion? I barely had time to focus on my own stuff because someone always needed something, and it wasn't like they ever thanked me. I don't even think they realized how much I was doing. It was like, in their minds, I was some kind of magic elf who made everything happen without breaking a sweat. But I noticed how Luke got praised for the smallest thing, like mowing the lawn once a month, while I was busting my butt to keep the house running. And Rachel? She was the golden child. She could do no wrong. If she spilled juice on the carpet, it was, "Oh, Rachel, you're so silly." But if I forgot to unload the dishwasher, it was, "Julia, why can't you just be more responsible?" One summer, when I was 17, my mom decided to throw a barbecue for the whole neighborhood. I didn't even get asked if I wanted to help. She just handed me a list of things to do. Marinate the chicken, make potato salad, set up the chairs in the backyard, and decorate the tables. Meanwhile, Luke sat on the couch playing video games, and Rachel ran around blowing bubbles. I asked my mom why no one else was helping, and she said, "Because you're the only one I can count on, Julia." That was the first time I realized how unfair it all was. But I didn't say anything. I just did what I always did. Sucked it up and got to work. Things only got worse when I went to college. I stayed close to home because it was cheaper, and I figured it would give me time to focus on my studies. Ha! Joke's on me. My mom acted like me living 20 minutes away meant I was still on call. She'd text me in the middle of a lecture. "Julia, can you come over and help me rearrange the living room?" Or, "Rachel needs cupcakes for her school bake sale. Can you swing by and bake a batch?" And if I said no, she'd pull the guilt card. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Meanwhile, Luke had moved out to another state, and Rachel was still a kid, so all the responsibility fell on me. Even when I told them I was drowning in schoolwork, they didn't get it. "You're so good at multitasking," my mom would say. "You'll figure it out." And I did, somehow. I graduated with a degree in event management, mostly because I figured, hey, if I'm going to be organizing everyone's lives, I might as well get paid for it. But even after I started my own business, the demands didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. My mom would call and say, "Julia, since you're an event planner, can you help me with Rachel's birthday party? Just a few ideas, nothing big." It was always big, though. One year, she wanted a circus theme, complete with a popcorn machine and a clown. I spent 2 weeks finding vendors and setting everything up. The day of the party, my mom told her friends, "Isn't it amazing what you can do with Pinterest?" I was fuming, but I didn't say anything. That's the thing about being the family helper. You're expected to be grateful for the privilege of being used and not being appreciated at the same time. Looking back, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have told them how unfair it was, how much it hurt to be overlooked and taken for granted. But I didn't. I just kept saying yes, hoping one day they'd realize how much I was doing for them. That day never came. Instead, things kept piling up until I couldn't take it anymore. All right, let me just say this. If you ever think about planning a family member's wedding for free, don't. It's a trap. I learned this the hard way when my brother Luke got engaged to Emily. Now, I already had my doubts about this whole thing because, well, Emily isn't exactly, let's call her easygoing. She's the type of person who'll send back her latte if the foam doesn't have the right consistency. Yeah, she's one of those people. When they announced their engagement, I knew my life was about to get stressful. Sure enough, the day after the big announcement, my mom called me. Julia, you're going to plan Luke and Emily's wedding, right? I hesitated because, by this point, I'd already decided that my time was worth something. My business wasn't huge yet, but I had clients and deadlines, and I couldn't just drop everything for Luke. So I said, Mom, I don't think I can do it for free. This is my job now. She gasped like I just insulted the family honor. Julia, you're his sister. You can't charge family. I caved, of course. I always caved. I told myself I'd just help a little, like giving advice or recommending vendors. But that's not how my family works. The next day, Emily called me with a list. Not a, hey, Julia, could you maybe list number. It was a full-blown to-do list. Okay, so I need you to find a venue that can accommodate at least 200 people, she started. And it has to have a view, like a really nice view. Oh, and it can't cost more than $5,000 because Luke and I are trying to be budget conscious. I wanted to scream. A venue for 200 people with a really nice view for $5,000? Was she serious? I don't know what fantasy land she lived in, but in the real world, that's impossible. Still, I nodded along and said I'd look into it. That was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I became their personal assistant, therapist, and punching bag. Emily couldn't make up her mind about anything. One week she wanted a garden wedding. The next, she was all about a rustic barn theme. Luke, of course, didn't care about any of it. Whatever Emily wants, he'd say, shrugging. By the time we hit month 3, I was juggling so many tasks that I actually had to turn down paying clients. I didn't even get so much as a thank you. Luke would text me at random hours with stuff like, hey, can you find someone to do custom invitations? Emily doesn't like the ones we saw at the store. One day, Emily sent me a message saying, I need you to hand make 200 invitations. The ones online are too expensive. And you're crafty, right? Crafty? I run a business, not an Etsy shop. You'd think they'd appreciate the effort, right? Nope. Emily called me after she got the finished invitations and said, they're fine, but I was kind of hoping for more gold accents. I hung up on her. Then came the seating chart. Oh, the seating chart. Emily wanted everyone placed according to some complicated hierarchy. Apparently, her college roommate deserved to sit closer to the bride than our aunt, who literally helped raise Luke. I spent hours rearranging names on that chart only for Emily to change it all again the night before the wedding. Sorry, Julia, she said with a fake laugh. I know this is a lot, but I just want it to be perfect. By the time the wedding day rolled around, I was exhausted. I'd been working nonstop for weeks to make sure everything went smoothly. The morning of the wedding, I got up at 5 a.m. to supervise the setup at the venue. I coordinated with the florist, the caterer, and the DJ. I even ran home to grab extra tablecloths because the ones they ordered were too short. And where were Luke and Emily during all this? At the salon, getting massages and drinking overpriced smoothies. When the ceremony finally started, I was so tired I could barely stand. But I stayed because I wanted to see my work come together. And I'll admit, it looked amazing. The venue was gorgeous. The flowers were stunning, and the whole thing had this dreamy, romantic vibe. For about 10 minutes, I felt proud of myself. Then, Luke gave his speech. He stood up and thanked everyone. Emily's parents got a shout-out for funding the vision. His groomsmen got a nod for keeping him sane. Even the DJ got a quick mention. And me, the person who had literally spent 6 months making this wedding happen? Nothing. Not a single word. I sat there, stunned. I thought maybe he'd thank me later, like in private, but no. When I saw him after the speeches, he just grinned and said, Great job, Jules. Everyone loved it. That's when it hit me. They didn't see me as a person. To them, I was just a tool, a free service, someone to use and discard when they didn't need me anymore. At the end of the night, I stayed behind to clean up because, of course, no one else thought to do it. As I was stacking chairs, Emily walked by and said, You missed a spot on the dessert table. I didn't even respond. I just dropped the stack of chairs and walked out. The next day, my mom called me, all cheerful. Wasn't it a beautiful wedding? It was fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Well, we couldn't have done it without you, she added. I wanted to scream. We couldn't have done it without you? No, Mom, I did it. You all just showed up and took credit. But instead of saying that, I mumbled something about being busy and hung up. That's when I decided, never again. No more free labor. No more bending over backward for people who don't even see me. If they wanted my help in the future, They could pay me like everyone else, or figure it out on their own. Luke and Emily never even sent me a thank you card, but honestly, I didn't expect one. At that point, I knew exactly how much they valued me, which is to say, not at all. Looking back, that wedding was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about the work or the lack of gratitude. It was about realizing that I'd spent my whole life putting everyone else first. And for what? A pat on the back? A half-hearted good job? Number I deserved better. And I was finally ready to do something about it. But for them, nothing's changed. They continued being entitled people with huge expectations and zero appreciation. By the time Rachel started college, I thought I'd learned my lesson about helping my family for free. After the disaster that was Luke's wedding, I'd told myself I was done being their unpaid labor. But Rachel? She had a way of pulling me back in, mostly because she was the baby of the family. And for some reason, that made me feel like I owed her something. Rachel was 18, going to some small liberal arts school a couple of hours away. She'd call me every once in a while, usually when she needed something. It was never a casual, hey, how's life and call. It was always, hey, Julia, can you do me a favor? One time she asked me to edit her essay at midnight because it was due at 8 a.m. the next day. I told her no, and she hit me with, wow, so much for being a supportive sister. But the real drama started during her sophomore year. She called me one afternoon, her voice all chipper. That should have been my first warning sign. Julia? Guess what? I sighed. What? My sorority's spring gala is coming up, and I'm in charge of planning it. Oh, that's nice, I said, already feeling the setup. Yeah, and I was thinking, you're so good at this kind of stuff. Could you, help me? Just a little? Rachel, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I can't. I'm really busy with work right now. But you're an event planner. This is like your thing. Exactly, I said. It's my job. I don't have time to do this for free. Her tone changed immediately. Wow. So you're really not going to help me? After everything I've done for you? I laughed out loud. What have you ever done for me, Rachel? I don't know. Been your sister? I hung up on her. For a couple of weeks, I thought that was the end of it. I figured Rachel would find someone else to help or, I don't know, actually do the work herself. But no. She called me again a month later, this time sounding frantic. Julia, I'm freaking out, she said, barely pausing to breathe. The gala is in 2 weeks, and nothing is done. The venue fell through, the caterer backed out, and I have no idea how to fix this. That sucks, I said, trying not to sound too smug. Please, Julia, I'm begging you. Just give me some advice. I don't know what to do. I should have said no. I should have let her deal with the consequences of her own lack of planning. But part of me felt bad for her. So I gave her some tips. Basic stuff like how to find a last-minute venue and what kind of food works best for a big group. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she gushed. You're a lifesaver. But of course, that wasn't enough. 2 days later, she texted me asking if I could design the invitations. It's just a simple layout, she said. Like that made it any less time-consuming. When I told her I couldn't, she whined about how no one else understands my vision like you do. By the time the gala rolled around, I was getting hourly updates from Rachel about how everything was falling apart. The tablecloths didn't match the napkins, the flowers were the wrong shade of pink, the DJ was late. I tried to stay out of it, but then she called me in tears the night before the event. Julia, I don't know what to do. Everyone's going to think I'm a failure. I took a deep breath. Rachel, you waited until the last minute to plan this. What did you expect? I just thought it would be easier, she sniffled. Maybe next time don't volunteer for something you're not ready to handle, I said. She didn't reply, just hung up on me. The next day, I saw photos from the gala on Instagram. It was rough. The decorations looked thrown together, the food was served in disposable trays, and the lighting was straight out of a middle school dance. The caption on Rachel's post said something like, "Not perfect, but we made it happen." I thought that was the end of it. But then she called me again, a week later. Julia, you ruined my gala. I blinked. What? If you had helped me, it would have been amazing, she said. But you were too selfish to care. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rachel, I didn't ruin anything. You ruined it by not planning ahead. You're supposed to have my back, she said, her voice shaking. I snapped. Rachel, I've had your back your whole life. I've done more for you than anyone else in this family, and I've never asked for anything in return. But guess what? I'm done. You're an adult now. Figure it out yourself. And then I hung up, without waiting for her to respond. For months, Rachel barely spoke to me. Whenever I saw her at family gatherings, she'd glare at me or make passive-aggressive comments. My mom tried to mediate, saying things like, Julia, can't you just apologize? Rachel's still learning. Learning what? I shot back. How to dump her responsibilities on other people. Luke, of course, sided with Rachel. "You were kinda harsh, Jules," he said one night. "She's just a kid." "She's 18, I said. "She's not a kid anymore." It was exhausting. No matter how much I explained myself, my family just didn't get it. To them, I was the bad guy for not swooping in to save the day like I always did. But I didn't care. For the first time, I was standing up for myself, and it felt good. Over time, Rachel stopped blaming me, at least publicly. She still made snide comments every now and then, but I could tell she was embarrassed. Her sorority sisters hadn't been impressed with the gala, and she'd been voted out of her event coordinator role. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I was relieved. Maybe now she'd think twice before taking on responsibilities she couldn't handle. At this point, I'd like to think I was finally done with my family's entitled nonsense. I'd been burned enough times to know better. But then the last straw came with the dinner party. This was the moment when I realized my family wasn't just clueless. They were downright audacious. It started with a phone call from my mom. I was at home finishing up a client proposal when her name popped up on my screen. I considered ignoring it, but I ended up answering. Big mistake. "Julia!" she chirped as soon as I answered. "You'll come early on Saturday to set the table, right?" I frowned, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder. "What's happening Saturday?" "The dinner party for Luke's promotion," she said, like I should have known. I blinked. "I wasn't invited." "Well, of course not," she replied. Her tone so casual it made my blood boil. "It's mostly Luke's colleagues and their spouses. You wouldn't really fit in." Wow. Just wow. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice tight. "I'm not invited to the dinner, but you still want me to come early and set up?" "Exactly," she said, as though this was a perfectly reasonable request. "You're so good at these things, Julia. You've always had an eye for detail." I was speechless. For years, I'd put up with their nonsense, but this was a new low. I wasn't good enough to be a guest, but I was good enough to do the grunt work. My mom took my silence as agreement. "Great," she said. "We'll need you here by 4 o'clock. Don't forget to bring extra napkins. We might run out." I hung up without saying goodbye. For the rest of the week, I stewed. I knew I should have said no right then and there, but old habits die hard. The people pleaser in me felt obligated to show up. But the angrier I got, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to skip this dinner, I was going to ruin it. Saturday rolled around, and I arrived at their house just before 4 o'clock. My mom was in full-on hostess mode, bustling around the kitchen with her party apron on. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Julia, you're here! Good. The table needs to be set, the candles need to be lit, and the appetizers are in the fridge. Can you plate them?" "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. But in my head, I was already plotting. First, I accidentally swapped the fancy linen napkins with some paper ones I found in the pantry. Then, I set the table with mismatched plates and cutlery. Nothing too obvious, just enough to throw off the aesthetic. I placed the salad forks where the dessert spoons should go and deliberately skewed the alignment of the place settings. My mom was too busy barking orders to notice. Next, I moved on to the appetizers. They'd ordered these tiny gourmet canapes from some swanky caterer, and my job was to arrange them on trays. Instead, I accidentally knocked one of the trays onto the floor. Oops. The rest went into the fridge, but I made sure to leave the temperature dial cranked all the way down. By the time they got to them, they'd be half frozen. My pièce de résistance, the drinks. Luke and Emily had splurged on a couple of bottles of fancy imported drinks for the evening. I poured a liberal amount of salt into each bottle and gave them a good shake before resealing them. I even left a cheap bottle on the counter as a backup. By 5 o'clock, I was done helping. I grabbed my purse and told my mom I had to run an errand. She barely looked up from her seating chart. "Just be back before the guests arrive," she said. I didn't go back. Instead, I made a reservation at my favorite restaurant and treated myself to a quiet, drama-free evening. As I enjoyed my meal, my phone buzzed relentlessly. First, it was my mom. "Where are you? The guests are arriving." Then Luke chimed in. "Julia, this isn't funny. Mom says the appetizers aren't ready." I silenced my phone and ordered dessert. Later that night, Clara, my best friend, texted me. "Check Emily's Instagram," she wrote, followed by about 10 laughing emojis. Curious, I opened the app. Emily had posted a series of photos from the dinner party, and let me tell you, it was a train wreck. The first photo showed the table, which looked like a thrift store threw up on it. Mismatched plates, crooked napkins, and unlit candles. The caption read, "When your sister promises to help but bails at the last minute." The next photo was even better. Luke pouring a glass of the salted drink, his face contorted in disgust. "Note to self, never trust Julia with anything," Emily had written. I couldn't stop laughing. For years, I'd busted my ass to make my family's events perfect, and they never appreciated it. Now, they were finally getting a taste of what life was like without me holding everything together. After the dinner party fiasco, I thought my family would finally get the message. You'd think ruining a whole evening would make them reconsider treating me like a free-for-all event planner. But no, my family, they're stubborn. Instead of self-reflection, they doubled down on blaming me. I wasn't just the villain. I was the scapegoat for every single thing that went wrong that night. Luke's text barrage was the worst. He didn't stop for days. Stuff like, I can't believe you'd sabotage my big night, and what kind of sister does this? At one point, he even called me vindictive. That one made me laugh. Oh, I was vindictive? What about years of using me like a servant while ignoring my own achievements? Funny how they only noticed me when I didn't show up to save the day. Emily, of course, had to get her 2 cents in. She left me a voicemail so dramatic I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or roll my eyes. Julia, you embarrassed Luke in front of his boss. Do you know how that makes me look? She whined, as if her image was my top priority. I didn't bother replying. Let her stew. Even my mom, who usually tried to smooth things over, was furious. She called me 2 days after the party, and I braced myself for another round of guilt tripping. Julia, she started, her voice sharp, your behavior was completely unacceptable. I almost laughed. My behavior? Mom, I said, you asked me to set the table for a party I wasn't invited to. What did you expect? I expected you to be mature, she snapped. You've always been the reliable one, Julia. This was so out of character. Maybe you should have thought about that before treating me like a maid, I shot back. I'm done being your go-to. Find someone else to exploit. She gasped like I'd slapped her. Exploit? Julia, we're family. Exactly, I said. And family is supposed to appreciate each other, not use them. I hung up before she could argue. I didn't feel bad about it either. For once, I was standing my ground. The fallout from the dinner party was worse than I'd imagined. Word spread fast in our small town, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about what happened. My mom was quick to spin the narrative, painting herself as the innocent victim of her ungrateful daughter. I heard through the grapevine that she told her friends, I don't know what's gotten into Julia lately. She's so selfish. The irony wasn't lost on me. All these years of being their doormat, and now I was selfish for not wanting to be treated like dirt? Classic. The thing is, it wasn't just about the dinner party. That night was the culmination of years of being overlooked, undervalued, and straight up used. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and decided to sabotage their lives. They pushed me to my breaking point, and I wasn't about to apologize for finally snapping. But my family? They didn't see it that way. To them, I was the villain for not playing along anymore. Every missed text, every unanswered call was another strike against me. And honestly, I was fine with that. Let them think what they want. At least villains have boundaries. It felt like the logical next step to put some serious space between me and my family. I didn't make some grand announcement, no dramatic speeches or ultimatums. I just stopped. Stopped answering their calls, stopped showing up for birthdays or holidays, stopped giving any part of myself to people who didn't deserve it. At first, I thought they might fight for me, try to reach out and make things right. But if I've learned one thing about my family, it's that their pride always outweighs their capacity for self-reflection. Instead of admitting they were wrong, or even acknowledging my absence, they doubled down on their usual tactics, bad-mouthing me behind my back. It started with Rachel. Of course it did. She was the family's golden girl, and she had no problem playing the victim in my absence. My mom mentioned something about how Rachel was so hurt that I didn't come to her college graduation party. Hurt? Rachel hadn't spoken to me in months, but suddenly I was supposed to drop everything for her milestone? Yeah, right. Then Luke joined in. I heard from Clara, who's still friends with some of our mutuals from back home, that he'd been going around telling people I was difficult and selfish. That one really pissed me off. This was coming from the guy who couldn't organize a barbecue without leaning on me. But now I was the problem, and my mom, she was the worst. She called up every relative who would listen, spinning some sob story about how I'd abandoned the family. Never mind that I'd spent years sacrificing my time, energy, and sanity for them. To hear her tell it, I was the villain who broke up our happy little unit. Then came the trip. Oh, the trip. It was Luke's idea, of course. He booked a family vacation to Florida and made sure everyone knew he was footing the bill. They rented a big beach house, posted pictures all over social media, Rachel lounging by the pool, my mom holding a smoothie. The captions were the best part. Rachel posted something like, "Family time is the best time." My mom shared a picture of the sunset with the caption, "So grateful for my wonderful children." Even Luke got in on it, posting a picture of him and Rachel clinking glasses with the caption, "Couldn't ask for a better family." It was so obvious what they were doing. The whole thing screamed, "Look, Julia, we're doing great without you." like I was supposed to be heartbroken over not being included in their little beach party. I saw the post while scrolling through Instagram one evening, and instead of feeling hurt, I just laughed. If they wanted to spend thousands of dollars proving they didn't need me, that was on them. Meanwhile, I was curled up on my couch with a book, enjoying the peace and quiet of my family-free life. Weeks turned into months, and I didn't hear a word from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. Part of me wondered if they even noticed I was gone. But the longer the silence stretched, the more I realized how freeing it was. Without their constant demands, I had so much more time and energy for myself. I started saying yes to things I'd always put off, taking on new clients, signing up for yoga classes, even planning a solo trip to Italy. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Rachel. "Hey Julia, hope you're doing okay. I miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to reply. It seemed too casual, too convenient. After all the crap she'd pulled, why now? "Hi Rachel, I'm fine. What's up?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Mom's 60th birthday is coming up, and we're throwing her a surprise party. I was hoping you could help plan it." I put my phone down and laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but an actual, full-on laugh. Of course, she wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She wanted something. "I can't," I replied. "I'm too busy." Her response came quickly. "Seriously, Julia? This is Mom's big day. You can't just put your pride aside for one night?" "It's not pride," I wrote back. "It's boundaries. Good luck with the party." She didn't reply after that. The party came and went without me. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no longing to be there. If anything, I felt relieved. A few weeks later, Rachel texted me again. "We missed you at the party. Hope you're okay." I didn't respond. It had been almost a year since I cut ties with my family, and life had never felt more peaceful. For the first time, I was living for myself. No more guilt, no more obligations, and definitely no more being used as their personal errand girl. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I missed the idea of family, but then I'd remind myself, it wasn't the family I had. My family wasn't kind or supportive. They were users, and I'd finally stopped letting them use me. I was in the middle of planning a high-profile corporate gala when the call came. My phone buzzed with a familiar name, Mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. It had been months since she'd last tried to contact me, and honestly, I liked it that way. But something made me pick up. Curiosity, maybe. Or a desire to hear just how far they'd go this time. "Hello?" I said, keeping my tone flat. "Julia," my mom said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "How are you, honey?" I blinked. That was new. "I'm fine. What's going on?" There was a pause, and then she sighed. "We've been talking, me, Luke, Rachel, and we realized we owe you an apology." "An apology?" I almost laughed. Where was this energy a year ago? "Oh," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "We were wrong to take you for granted," she continued. "You've done so much for this family, and we didn't appreciate it the way we should have." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. It was what I'd wanted to hear for years, but now that it was happening, it felt hollow. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" "Well," she said, hesitating, "we've been struggling. Things haven't been the same without you." I snorted. Of course. It wasn't about me. It was about what I could do for them. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked bluntly. She hesitated again, and then it came out. "Rachel's wedding is coming up, and we really need your help. You're so talented, Julia. No one can do what you do." There it was, the real reason for the call. I couldn't help but laugh, loud and bitter. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You're only apologizing because you need me to save Rachel's wedding? That's not fair," she said quickly. "We miss you, Julia. We want to make things right." "No, you don't," I said. "You want me to fix your problems like I always did. Well, guess what? I'm not your fix-it person anymore." "Julia, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Rachel's been so upset. She really wants you there." I thought about all the times Rachel had called me selfish, ungrateful, a terrible sister. All the times she'd expected me to clean up her messes without so much as a thank you. And now she wanted me to swoop in and save her big day? "No," I said firmly. "What do you mean, no?" my mom asked, her voice rising. "I mean, no," I said. "I'm not helping with the wedding. I'm not coming to the wedding. And I'm not letting you guilt me into going back to the way things were." Julia," she started, but I cut her off. "You don't get it, Mom," I said, my voice sharp. "You've spent years treating me like I'm only good for what I can do for you. And now that I've stepped away, you're finally realizing what you lost. But it's too late. I'm done." There was a long silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "We're trying, Julia. Isn't that worth something?" "Not when it's only because you need something from me," I said. You're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry because it's inconvenient for you now that I'm gone. Julia, please, she said again, but there was a desperation in her voice now. No, I said one last time. I'm done. And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free. Truly, completely free. The weight of their expectations, their demands, their endless neediness, it was gone. I'd slammed the door shut, and this time I wasn't opening it again. Rachel's wedding went ahead without me, of course. I heard through the grapevine that it was a disaster. Last-minute venue issues, a no-show caterer, and a seating chart mix-up that had people sitting in the wrong spots all night. Apparently, Emily tried to salvage things, but without someone like me to hold it all together, the cracks were impossible to hide. Clara called me after hearing the news. So, how does it feel to be vindicated? She asked, laughing. Honestly, I said, smiling, it feels amazing. My mom, Luke, Rachel, they're all part of my past now, and that's where they'll stay. As for me, I am okay. I'm better than okay. For the first time in my life, I'm living on my own terms, free from their expectations and demands. They can call me selfish, difficult, ungrateful, whatever helps them sleep at night. I know my worth, and I'm not lowering my standards just to make them comfortable. They had their chances. They blew them. And me? I'm done looking back.